Hey everyone, welcome to today's sessions on motivation and emotion in our Intro to Psychology class. Now, before we get into the specifics and the fascinating world of what we do, why we do it, and how we feel, I've got to tell you that my wife watched the last few videos and said that I am too serious, that I need to have a few more jokes or something to keep it exciting. So I guess with that stated, I'll go ahead and start with the joke. What did Microsoft employees say to Bill Gates after his motivational speech? Word. I guess you may have to, maybe funnier in my own mind than it is for you, but that's my first attempt. I'll tell a few more jokes as we go along, but let's go ahead and get started. You know, food for thought. What are your goals? Why do you pursue your goals? Why did you choose those goals? When are you satisfied? Or if you haven't met that goal, when do you give up? These are all questions about motivation or why we act and do the things we do. Psychologists believe that motivation refers to the dynamics of behavior. That's the ways in which our actions are aroused, maintained, and guided. You know, the engine that drives our behavior is referred to as motivational intelligence. It's actually referred to as MQ instead of IQ that we talked about in the last course. The beauty of MQ is that it's not only about how you motivate yourself, but it also is about how you motivate or influence others. Research suggests we motivate others not by what we say to them, rather how we think. Motivation fosters creativity and critical thinking. While motivated students may not be more intelligent than unmotivated students, but it's the motivational student that needs to figure out the answer to a question or to master a concept that pushes their thinking and allows them to achieve more. So in a sense, motivation does have an effect on your intelligence. So after you've read chapter 10, and you've watched this video, there are a lot of things that we're going to cover as you're going to see in the next few slides here. And I'm not going to read them individually, but I think you know what they are after you've read the chapter. And what I'd like to do is just start again with a summary video of chapter 10, Motivation and Emotion.
Welcome, students. We are now in chapter 10, delving into the captivating realms of motivation and emotion. Crafted by your Professor of Psychology, Jeffrey Hastings, this presentation seeks to unravel the intricate interplay between motivation and emotion, igniting the flames of inspiration and understanding within each of you. In this short video, we transcend the conventional boundaries of scholarly discourse to embrace the profound significance of motivation and emotion in shaping our perceptions, actions, and aspirations. As we navigate through the rich tapestry of human motivation, it becomes evident that our potential for greatness knows no bounds. It's not merely about where we come from or what we've been through. With unwavering motivation, resolute determination, and a fervent desire to make a positive impact, each of you possesses the inherent capacity to achieve extraordinary feats. Let this be a clarion call to action, a resounding reminder that within each of you lies the power to do more, be better, and effect positive change in the world. Embrace the transformative force of motivation and emotion, for they serve as the catalysts that propel us towards excellence, resilience, and a profound sense of purpose. Have you ever wondered why we do what we do? What drives us to eat, work, love, and strive for success? These questions lead us to the intriguing world of motivation and emotion. Motivation is the force that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-oriented behaviors. It's the reason behind our actions, desires, and needs. Emotion, on the other hand, is a complex state of feeling that results in physical and psychological changes. It influences our thoughts and behaviors, and its expression is tied intrinsically to our motivation. Several theories attempt to explain motivation. The drive reduction theory proposes that our actions are driven by the desire to lessen needs that disrupt our internal balance. The arousal theory suggests that we're driven to perform actions that maintain an optimal level of physiological arousal. And the hierarchy of needs theory emphasizes that we're motivated by a series of hierarchical needs, from basic physiological requirements to self-actualization. Now let's dive into the science behind motivation. It's a complex interplay between our biological and cognitive aspects. Biologically, the hypothalamus, nestled deep within our brains, plays a key role. It's the maestro conducting our body's symphony of hormones, influencing our hunger, thirst, and even our drive to achieve. Then there's our brain's reward system, a network of neurons that releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter that makes us feel oh so good. This system pushes us to repeat behaviors that lead to rewards, driving our motivations. Our frontal lobes, the decision-making centers, also influence motivation. They help us weigh the pros and cons of our actions, guiding us to make choices that serve our long-term goals. But it's not all biology. Cognitive factors play a part too. Intrinsic motivation, the drive that comes from within us, and extrinsic motivation, the push from external rewards or punishments, both shape our behavior. Understanding the science of motivation allows us to better comprehend our own behaviors and motivations. Emotion, a powerful force that shapes our thoughts, behaviors, and decisions. Emotions are more than just feelings. They are complex phenomena that incorporate physiological responses and cognitive components. When we experience an emotion, our bodies respond in specific ways. For instance, when we feel fear, our heart rate increases, preparing us to either fight or flee. The nature of emotions has been studied extensively, leading to the development of several major theories. The James Lange theory suggests that our bodily responses precede the emotional experience. In contrast, the Cannon-Bard theory posits that our physiological responses and emotional experiences occur simultaneously. The Schachter-Singer two-factor theory takes it a step further, proposing that our emotions are determined by both our physiological responses and our cognitive interpretation of those responses. Our emotions, complex and diverse, play a crucial role in how we perceive and interact with the world around us. We've explored the intriguing world of motivation and emotion, but our journey doesn't stop here. As we continue, we'll delve into the complex and fascinating realm of sex, gender, and sexuality. We'll explore how these elements shape our identity, influence our behavior and interactions, and challenge societal norms and expectations. We'll analyze the scientific breakthroughs and theories that have revolutionized our understanding of these concepts. So buckle up. Join us in our next video as we delve into the fascinating world of sex, gender, and sexuality.
Okay, so we'll move on to the book in chapter 10, section 1, the basics of motivation. In this section, we discuss the role played by needs, drives, responses, goals, and incentives in shaping our motives. We'll also discuss intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, as well as Maslow's basic needs and growth needs. And of course, as we start each one of these sections, it's time for a joke. People say I should be a motivational speaker, but I just don't have the motivation. Can you relate? Do you feel like sometimes you know about motivation, you know how it could influence your intelligence and even your well-being, but you just don't feel motivated to do something you know you need to do? That's what I hope that we'll uncover on this section is not just understand motivation, but also able to apply certain things to improve our motivation when we know it needs to be improved. So psychologists believe there are two primary types of motivation. Of course, we talk about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is when we do something because we find it internally, intrinsically rewarding, like going to a party, playing video games maybe, or seeing our activities or the things we do as meaningful or that will allow us to learn and grow. So we're internally motivated to do these things or have a feeling of accomplishment. On the other hand, extrinsic motivation comes from outside factors like grades or how much you get paid or approval from your parents or your boss. Most of the stuff we label as like work falls into this category. For the test, just understand that the psychology also of motivation can be best summarized as the study of why we do what we do. And it's also worth noting that while things like salaries and rewards can get us excited, they're not the only things that motivate us to perform. You may want to remind your boss or someone about that, but having the chance to tackle challenging, interesting work that we genuinely find rewarding is just as crucial. The quality of what we do is more influenced by factors like personal interest and the freedom to pick what we work on, when we want to work on it. And what's wrong with working from home? A lot of employers have a problem with it. But when we're more comfortable and happier at work, we are more engaged and laser focused on work and innovative ideas. Well, I guess that is until you have children or dogs like I have that can be disruptive at home. But some experts suggest also older people like me are more motivated by internal factors in our jobs compared to the younger generation. But research doesn't agree. We can see these experts are probably the same one that make a mistake to think the younger generation, they call the entitled generation, only cares about themselves. It's not true. Seems like finding value and intrinsic reward in your work, in your career, is a big deal, no matter what age you are. And whenever you see something pop up on the screen with the gray behind it, that is something you definitely want to take a note on to prepare for your test, because it's certainly a test question that some of you will be asked. So let's look at the model of motivation. Many motivated activities begin with a need or an internal deficiency. Our drive for something that we don't have, we're deficient in. So drive activates a response. That's an action or a series of actions designed to push us toward a goal. And the goal is the target of our motivated behavior. Reaching a goal that satisfies the need ends the chain of events. Once we have it, then we no longer care about it, is what it says. Thus, a simple model of motivation can be shown in a way depicted in the illustration you see on the slide. So you have the need leads to a drive, to a response. So the need leads to the drive, which further leads to a response, and then to a goal. The goal leads to, once you achieve it, need reduction. And then again, it can go back to leading to the need again. So you may need it again. Like hunger is an internal need. It's biological, and we're no longer hungry. But again, of course, we'll have need reduction after we eat, but then we can become hungry again. And it's that pattern. So you may think, aren't needs and drives the same thing? No, they're not. The strength of needs and drives can actually differ as well. A need is a state of deprivation or deficiency, like I mentioned earlier. A drive, on the other hand, it's a state of bodily tension, such as hunger or thirst, that arises from an unmet need. The satisfaction of a drive that's what drive reduction is. In drive theory that you read about in the book, it's based on the principle of homeostasis. And that's the tendency of our body to remain at a steady internal state, which I'll talk about here in another slide. But usually our actions are energized by a mixture of internal needs and external incentives. That's why a strong need may change an unpleasant incentive into a desired goal. For instance, my daughters remember when their mom and I took them on a road trip when they were young. We went to Florida and we stopped to eat dinner on the way, and I wanted them to eat their broccoli, and they hadn't eaten their broccoli. They ate everything else, their chicken tenders or whatever, but they didn't eat their broccoli. Because they didn't need to eat the broccoli because they had already, of course, eaten and they were no longer really hungry, I offered them an incentive, an extrinsic reward, and it was $50 if they ate all the broccoli on their plate. Of course, they ate it in seconds, but if they had not eaten in several days or they were starving, of course, I would need to provide that incentive. So that's what it's meant by, if their drive or that need is really high, then you don't have to offer the incentive. The incentive becomes less of valuable. But does that kind of make sense? All they remember, of course, about that is they found out that $50 I was going to give them anyway to have spending money on the trip for souvenirs. But you get the point. So when we talk about also motives or motivation, these needs, psychologists have come up with a number of ways to kind of classify these needs or group them as human motives. Classifying these motives, it's useful for predicting how people will behave in certain conditions. However, the classification system, it may differ in their focus. In this section, we'll look at three systems. The first stems from self-determination theory. And the second is a more complex model developed by a humanist. His name is Abraham Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you probably heard about. And finally, we'll consider a simplified model of classifying motives that fits with both self-determination theory and Maslow's work. A method for classifying motives groups them into three major categories. The first category is biological motives. They're based on innate needs that must be met for survival. Innate meaning we were born with it. It's not something we developed. It's something that we all have. The most important biological motives, of course, are hunger, thirst, pain avoidance, and the need for air, sleep, elimination of waste, and regulation of body temperature. And then we have stimulus motives. Stimulus motives express our need for stimulation and information. Examples include activity, curiosity, exploration, manipulation, and even physical contact. Although such motives also appear to be innate, they're not strictly necessary for survival. And then, of course, we have learned motives. Learned motives are based on learned needs, drives, and goals. They're often social in nature. Learned motives help explain many human activities, such as running for office or auditioning for a reality show, whatever. Many learned motives are related to learned needs for power, achievement, and affiliation. That's the need, of course, to be with others, approval, status, and security. So, all right, let's talk about the theory of self-determination. It's all about psychological needs for optimal well-being. According to this theory, we're all motivated by three innate motives. That's competence, that's our desire to experience mastery over our environment. Autonomy is our desire to control our own lives or be in control of our lives. And relatedness, we're human beings. We are social. It's our desire to be connected to and care for other people. So self-determination refers to a person's ability to make choices and manage their own life. Being self-determined means that you feel in greater control as opposed to being non-self-determined, which means that you basically leave your feeling that your life is controlled by others. You have no influence. It's what's going to happen. So self-determined theory, it stresses the importance of freedom of choice and classifies motives depending on whether we are doing something because it inherently brings us pleasure or because there are outside forces that are compelling us to act. For example, some people cook for a living and consider it, work, hard work. Others cook for pleasure and dream of one day opening a restaurant. For some people, doing yard work is gratifying and a wonderful way to relax or get exercise. But for others, it's equivalent to going to the dentist to have a root canal. Once again, according to self-determination theory, people need to feel the following to achieve psychological growth. First off, autonomy. People need to feel in control of their own behaviors and goals. The sense of being able to take direct action that will result in real change. It plays a major part in helping people feel self-determined. Competence, as people need to gain mastery of tasks and learn different skills. When people feel that they have the skills needed for success, they're more likely to take actions and will help them achieve their goals. And then connection or relatedness. People need to experience the same sense of belonging and attachment to other people. So if you see on the slide there, self-determination theory, it grew out of the work, first off, psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. They introduced this model in 1985. They had a book called Self-Determination and Intrinsic Motivation and Human Behavior. It's amazing how after COVID-19, when employers started allowing workers to work from home, there's been a lot of attention focused on employee mental health. And this theory, although it was, it's not specifically mentioned in the news or when people talk about it, this theory was done in 1985. It's really come into play, and a lot of people do talk about it, especially in the world that I work in. That's IO psychology for organizational psychology. So if you look at the screen, you see WMHT, that's workplace mental health. So when it comes to work, Deci and Ryan, and figure, this is back in 1985, they suggested and this is related self-determination theory to the workplace. Autonomy, freedom to work in a flexible work environment and schedules will provide autonomy for the workforce and demonstrates trust, the trust between that management and the workers. The workers that management needs to allow the employees to have autonomy and work, get their job done, and trust them. Competence, training and skills development through peer-to-peer mentoring and will develop competence, and it encourages knowledge sharing and creates an empowered workforce. And then they talked about relatedness, that workplace design and group activities will promote cohesiveness among employees. Bonding can reduce psychological stress and anxiety in the workplace. So true, especially we're finding out after COVID-19, when this is really at the forefront, a lot of these theories that may have been 30 years old really come into play and are still very relatable today in today's work environment, or 40 years. There's a few assumptions of self-determination theory. There are the two key assumptions. And employers, if you're an employer, you really need to think about this when you're interviewing someone for a job. First off, the need for growth drives behavior. If you think about that, the first assumption of that self-determination theory is that people are actively directed toward growth. People want to grow. Gaining mastery over challenges and taking new experiences are essential for developing a cohesive sense of self. And so you need to understand these are innate things about people that you need to look for in an interview, that need for growth. What are their goals? What are their desires? What do they want out of life? And then also autonomous motivation is important. Are they internally motivated? Are they going to be motivated, whatever? Are they going to rely on someone else to motivate them? Self-determination theory, it says, well, people are often motivated to act by external rewards like money or prizes or trips you may offer. That's all extrinsic motivation. That self-determination theory, it focused primarily on internal sources of motivation, such as the need to gain knowledge or independence. And that's a really important thing. But also with self-determination theory, there are some limitations. And one of the limitations, it doesn't focus on, more basic biological motives such as eating, drinking, and sex. A more comprehensive classification system that accounts for such motives was proposed by Abraham Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy of needs model is a highly influential way of organizing human needs from the most basic to the most advanced. Maslow's argument is that the most basic needs must be met before people can actually move up that pyramid. Specifically, Maslow proposed that we as humans experience a hierarchy of needs in which some needs are more basic or powerful than others. But just a quick note, it's important that, that this hierarchy is often represented as a pyramid that shows basic at the bottom, goes to biological needs at the bottom, and then higher level needs for personal fulfillment at the top. A lot of historians suggested that, they suggested that he should represent this in more of a hierarchy or a pyramid, but that wasn't original idea of Maslow's, but instead it became very popular when his theory was applied to the issue of managing employees in business. And that theory, along the way, some of Maslow's ideas have been, kind of misrepresented and oversimplified, but let's take a look a little bit closer at what he had to say, what Maslow's theory actually said. He believed that, the basic needs related to our physical survival, those physiological needs, safety, security, must be met for us to live. And consequently, they tend to be proponent or actually dominant in our everyday lives when we're, of course, infants early on. Other basic needs for love and belonging, that family, friendship, caring. And then the esteem and self-esteem become important, the recognition and self-respect. All these basic needs, if you see at the bottom, their needs are, all basic needs are deficiency motives. That is, they're activated by a lack of food, lack of water, security, love, esteem, and so forth. If our basic needs are met, he said, we tend to move on to actualizing our potential. For instance, a person who is starving, that's a physiological need, that's not met of hunger, or feeling threatened, their safety needs are not met, may have little interest in writing poetry or talking with friends as a way of meeting higher level needs. At the top of the hierarchy, you're going to see that's where our growth needs are, which are expressed as a need for self-actualization. To make it simple, Maslow's need theory suggests that you can't fully move up to the next level until the lower needs are met. So if you have all of your basic needs met and you're in the first 4 levels, then you can live for the purpose of others because you have everything you need to be happy and healthy. But for the test or the quiz, there's a few things you need to know. His in his hierarchy, the first 4 levels are classified as basic needs, and the highest level is associated with self-actualization is called a growth need. Just a note, after years of research was complete, he further classified his theory by stating, too, it's not an all or nothing concept. It's not like you have to move up the pyramid at a certain age. At your age right now, you can be self-actualized. If all your basic needs are met for the current age you are and where you're at in life, you can be self-actualized, which allows you to focus on the well-being of others. In other words, you can move up and down this pyramid throughout your life. As your needs change, so does motivation. Look at the pyramid closely. I want you to look at these different levels and relate to how this may be where you are currently in your life, or look at things that you may not have been given early on. And he also what Maslow said too, is it doesn't have to be completely fulfilled before you can move on to another level. They can be, for the most part, you have most of it, but in a perfect life, a perfect scenario, they would be completely met and kind of moved up in that order. So where are you now? I mean, just think about this for a moment. I'm going to tell you, I have a theory that goes along with this that's, I think, very important. I believe that self-actualization, it's a state of mind. It's our perception of our lives, perception of where we are, who we are, our own importance. You know, at the beginning of the video last week in Chapter 9, Intelligence, I discussed that bad things happen to all of us. It's just part of life. And while we can't change our past, we can change the way in which we understand and interpret our past. Our interpretation of our lives becomes our own reality. I said it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When I asked you to think about your own life, what did you see? What did you think about? If you don't learn anything else from the course, I hope you pay attention and learn this. I mean, one of the most important things about psychology, about our own psychology, and understanding how our lives, our decisions are all influenced by our experience and our perception on life. If you continue, if you focus, if you notice when you're looking at these things and you're looking at the things that you do not have, if you focus on negative events, you're most likely going to have a negative outcome. You'll constantly see the world from a negative lens and will fail to see all the amazing gifts and opportunities that are right in front of you. But the good news is this, you can change that. You know, by reframing your perception of those events, you can change everything. Understand how those negative events have made you stronger. It's not like we ignore them. We look at them, we understand why they're an important part of our lives, how it made us stronger. We can have a growth mindset. And remember, that is the belief in ourselves and our own abilities that we have the ability to make our lives better. That's part of self-determination theory too, to make our lives better. We do have the competence, and we can have the autonomy to get these things done the way we know how to get these things done. You have everything you need right now, regardless of what happened in your past, to be happy, to find joy, and to really be actualized. I hope you get that feeling, you understand it as you work your way through this, and as we think about the final project on how we're going to apply this in our own lives. You know, hopefully I'll see that in some of your reports, how you understand how, even though it's very easy to get caught up in these things that we don't have or the negative events, we do have the ability to change how we perceive that and apply this theory in our own lives. So to summarize Maslow's hierarchy, we have our basic needs again, those related to physical survival. They tend to be dominant in everyday life. And all the basic needs are deficiency motives. They're linked to a lack of something. Dominance of basic needs is not absolute. Then we have growth needs. And growth needs are expressed as a need for self-actualization. That's our strive to achieve potential. And the need for self-actualization is not based on, deficiencies. Rather, it is a positive, life-enhancing force for professional growth. So that's something to know. So the basic needs, you remember the basic needs, were those 4 levels at the bottom. Those are deficiency motives. We are motivated because we're not getting everything that we think we need. And the growth needs, that self-actualization, that's not based on a deficiency. Rather, it's a positive, life-enhancing focus for personal growth. That's the difference between the basic needs and the growth needs at the top. So, question for consideration. How do you motivate yourself to do something you don't want to do? I mean, is that possible? I can tell you, whenever I was in college, I used to convince myself, because I worked full-time, went to school full-time, I used to convince myself that I love it. You know, my wife and I, we were dating at that time. We got married right after college. And as soon as I finished, I remember telling her, it's like, I'm just thank, the Lord that I'm finished with that, finished going to school. I'm so happy it's finished. She goes, what are you talking about? You always said that you loved going to school. And I finally told him, I'd never told her this. If I didn't love going to school, it would be something that I couldn't do. So I had to force myself to think of how much I love going to school. Right after work, I would work from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And then starting at 5 until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and half a day on Saturday, I was in college full time. And it would drive me nuts if I didn't just make myself love going. So that's kind of that mindset. If you want to motivate your something, you have to find a way to love it. You have to, and you can convince yourself that you love something. And the only way you can do it is you have to focus not on the work itself, not on, say, schoolwork or college, but I focused on the job that I was going to get after I graduated, how this schoolwork played into my life goal and what I wanted to achieve, in life. And that actually made it more important. So for the test, work quality is affected more by intrinsic factors such as personal interest and freedom of choice. So my work quality, it got better at it, and even school quality is the same. I became better at it, or you will become better at it if you focus on the intrinsic factors, that what it's going to do for you personally, internally, for your life. And that is more important for you to understand. So another question, what's the difference between a drive and incentive? Do you remember? Drive is a state of tension that arises from an unmet need, while incentive is a specific reward that motivates behavior. Another one, identify the value of extrinsic rewards. How do we use rewards to motivate children? What is the value of pay and bonuses as a form of extrinsic reward in the workplace? Do extrinsic rewards motivate as well as intrinsic rewards? Why or why not? Can extrinsic rewards diminish the power of intrinsic rewards? Why or why not? Those are things that I kind of talked about, and I hope that you kind of know the answer to. If not, you may want to go back through that and listen to that one more time. So now, biological motives, Unit 2. And of course, here's the joke for Unit 2. I was at a motivational seminar one day, and the speaker asked me and 2 other volunteers to come up to the stage, and he all asked us the same question. When you're in your casket and your loved ones are mourning, what would you like to hear them say about you? Looked over the first man. The first man said, I'd like to hear them say that I was a great doctor and a great family man. The second guy said, I'd love to hear them say that I was a wonderful husband and a teacher who made a huge difference in their lives. Then he looked over to me and everyone looked, and I said, well, to be honest, I'd like to hear them say, look, he's moving, he's alive. Hopefully my jokes are getting a little bit better, but probably not. So what is, most valuable mineral on the earth? Think about that for a moment. The most valuable mineral on earth. If you search that up on Google, and if that were a test question and you looked at Google, AI is going to respond that jadeite, which is jade, is considered to be the most expensive mineral and can be priced up to $3 million per carat. Taphite is the rarest mineral on Earth, and it costs up to $35,000 per carat. And a pink star diamond are extremely rare gemstone, but it's auctioned. One was auctioned at Sotheby's at a staggering $71.2 million. And the definition is really why I'm scared to completely trust AI and how it probably will destroy life as we know it. Or actually could be the reason why you get the wrong answer if you ever look at Google for your questions on the exam. Is jade, taphite, or diamonds or gold, is it more valuable than water? In this section of chapter 10, we're going to discuss biological needs and our drive to satisfy them. So I'm going to ask you the question in another way. How important is air in your life, or water, or sleep, food, temperature regulation, or finding a restroom? For most of us, satisfying biological needs is so routine that we often overlook the extent to which they guide our behavior. But exaggerate any of these needs through famine, poverty, near drowning, bitter cold, or drinking 10 Red Bulls right before class, and our biological needs affect our behavior, and it becomes very evident on how it affects that behavior. So when it comes to the need for sleep, it's important to understand our circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythms, and it comes from the word, circa is about, and diem is day. You're about the day. Are physical, mental, and behavioral changes we all experience over a 24-hour cycle. Light and dark have the biggest influence on our circadian rhythms, but food intake, stress, physical activity, social environment, and temperature also affect them. Throughout the day, activities in the liver and the kidneys, the endocrine glands undergo really large changes. Bodily temperature, blood pressure, amino acid levels also shift from hour to hour. But how do these rhythms and these changes in our biological makeup, how do they affect motivation? Again, most of our biological needs don't seem all that important until they're unmet or they're exaggerated. So let me ask you, how do you feel when you don't get enough sleep? How does that make you feel during the day? Or if you sleep too much, how does that make you feel? Our needs and drives can often change from moment to moment. For example, after eating, our motivation to eat more food tends to diminish, and just a few minutes in the hot sun can leave us feeling thirsty. But our motivation also can vary over longer cycles, and these are guided by our internal, what they refer to as biological clocks. So the activities and many others, they peak once a day. If you look at that chart on the screen now, you're going to see a normal biological circadian rhythm, and everyone has a slightly different rhythm, but people are usually more motivated and alert at the high point or peak of their circadian rhythm. People with early peaks in their circadian rhythms are kind of what you refer to as day people, who wake up alert, they're energetic earlier in the day and fall asleep early in the evening. People who, with later peaks are referred to maybe as night people, who wake up kind of groggy or lively in the afternoon, early morning, early evening, and they stay up late. For most people, and most people meaning that work a normal 8 to 5 job, the best time to wake up is between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., which is considered ideal because it aligns with our natural sleep-wake cycles. The time frame allows exposure to sunlight, thereby regulating sleep patterns and producing the sleep hormone called melatonin that you probably all know of. So what really affects the circadian rhythm? So I mentioned that light is an indicator to our body. When our body sees that in the first part of the day, it tells our body it's time to wake up. There are different color lights, though, that have different effects on that circadian rhythm. Blue light has the strongest impact. It will wake us up, where red light really has no effect on our rhythm. So it's recommended that you have, if you have any light on, it's recommended not to have light. But if you do, make sure it's a red light tone. But what's the problem with cell phones and computers? That's blue light. So when you're looking at that in bed, trying to go to sleep, it is going to affect your circadian rhythm. You need to understand that. So, putting the computer away, the phone away for 2 hours before you sleep is so essential, because that is messing with that sleep pattern. And a lot of times our circadian rhythm can be off. How do you know it's off? Like if you traveled from here to Europe and you're groggy because your body is used to being up at a certain time, and now your circadian rhythm, your body is telling you it's light earlier during the day, and it messes with that sleepiness, and it causes decreased alertness and problems with memory and decision making. So I highly recommend you can go over to that podcast I mentioned before, the Anthony Huberman Labs podcast. He talks about circadian rhythms, very interesting research that if you really want to learn more about that, I highly recommend you take time to read or listen to that podcast. All right, let's talk about pain and thirst. Unlike hunger, thirst and sleepiness, that follow a regular daily cycle, that circadian rhythm. Pain avoidance is like an annoying friend that kind of shows up at a party uninvited. So pain avoidance occurs in distinct episodes when bodily damage happens, or when it's about, or you expect it to happen. You suspect this negative event. While most of our drives prompt us to actively seek a goal like food or warmth, pain tells us to avoid anything causing discomfort or distress. So that will create the anxiety. The other kind of things that is pain avoidance, because we get anxious thinking it's going to cause us this somehow mental, physical pain, and that's what creates that anxiety. So when it comes to pain, some people feel they need to be tough and never show any pain or distress, while others, at very first, they tell everyone about how they have the smallest ache. The friends that I'm talking about. Interestingly, this kind of tough attitude, it actually can raise your pain tolerance. And then if everything hurts, that actually can lower your pain tolerance. It's like pain tolerance is partially learned, which explains why some people endure things like ripping off hair with hot wax, or Botox injections, where most people like me would pass out. Moving on to thirst. Thirst is regulated by a separate system in part of our brain that's called the hypothalamus. There are two types of thirst. There's extracellular thirst, which happens when water is lost from fluids around our cells. And there's intracellular thirst, which kicks in when you eat an entire bag of saltine crackers, like my wife does every night because she has stomach ulcers, and that's probably caused by me. So know those two for the test: extracellular thirst and intracellular thirst. Understanding hunger and eating behavior. Hunger is influenced by both internal bodily factors and external environment and social ones. Let's look at the internal factors that control eating in more detail. So internal factors in hunger. Early studies suggested that hunger originated in the stomach, but research has since shown that hunger is not solely dependent on stomach contractions. It is partially, but the hypothalamus, it's the region of your brain, it plays a crucial role in managing hunger. It receives signals from the tongue and the digestive system, and it's sensitive to blood sugar levels, among other substances, to regulate hunger. So the hypothalamus, there are three parts of the hypothalamus that are involved in hunger and eating behavior. They're on the screen there. The lateral hypothalamus, it acts as a feeding start button. It triggers eating behavior, that activates eating behavior. And then there's a ventromedial hypothalamus, functions as like a stop button that says you're eating too much. And then we have a paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, which regulates blood sugar levels and controls the start and stopping of eating. So the hypothalamus reads the level of sugar in the blood and neural messages from the digestive system to regulate hunger. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. Have you ever felt like your brain has a mind of its own when it comes to your weight? Well, it kind of does. Your brain acts like a thermostat, keeping your weight in check over the long haul. It does this by keeping tabs on the fat stored in your body's special fat cells. So this set point, what's it all about? It's basically the weight of your body naturally maintains when you're not trying to, say, bulk up or slim down. It's when you dip below this weight, your hunger, kind of ramps up, and while going above it, triggers a release of a substance called leptin, which tells you to ease up on your snacks or not eat so much. And now you're thinking, if our brain is so smart and it kind of, tricks hunger only when it's needed, and it kind of motivates that for that hunger, why is it so hard to lose weight? And that's partially due to continuous ignoring of the set point and overeating, which increases the size of our stomach. So our stomach does have part of it, and there's also, not in addition to that, and some people go on these starvation diets that they limit themselves to 500 calories, for instance, per day, believe it or not. But what it does is resets the size of the stomach and makes it to where you get and eat slower. So they eat smaller amounts, healthy food, and eat slower, and that resets that hunger reading in the hypothalamus. So, the other two things are two hormones that are also a big part of hunger. And one, of course, I mentioned was leptin, and the other's insulin. These are both hormones. Like leptin, That regulates hunger by providing like the sensation of being full. Where insulin is different because it's a hormone that's released by the pancreas, which regulates the amount of like glucose, that's sugar that's released in our blood. And it's turning that sugar into energy. That's what that's what the insulin does. And you probably heard about, the miracle drugs. People are talking about Ozempic, it's a semaglutide. It helps our body release insulin when blood sugars are high. While there's early research, it's very promising, incredible results. We don't know yet if there's going to be any long-term negative effects, but one thing we do know is once you start that medication, you're going to have to stay on it forever because it doesn't alter the way your body reacts. It's just artificially applying that semaglutide is applying that release of insulin in your pancreas, and that's making it where it's turning that sugar into energy, carbohydrates, basically that carbs turn into sugar, sugar turns into that quick release of energy. But unfortunately, while they're rare cases, you can take medications that have leptin or insulin that can help you with obesity. For most of us, there's no quick fix. It's more important about how your brain is interpreting the signal of hunger. That's a lot more significant to our weight. And while you may not be able to kind of outsmart your brain, there are more effective approaches to weight management that we'll talk about here in a few slides. Okay, so beyond our biological needs for food, external factors really play a significant role in influencing our eating habits. Despite the internal drive for food, the prevalence of overweight and obesity in the United States is affecting roughly 72% of adults and showing a threefold increase in childhood obesity since 1980. And it kind of underscores the impact of external influences on eating habits. External eating clues there, such as the abundance of food. We can get, food anytime we want it very quickly. And that's in certain cultures like ours. And the influence on social settings that contributes significantly to the risk of overeating. For instance, there's a phenomenon you may have heard about, the freshman 15. That's among college freshmen once they go off to school, the all-you-can-eat dining halls, the late-night snacking, and the presence of others that a lot of people just say, let's go eat. Most people do gain an average of 15 pounds. It actually is true. There are also cultural factors that play a crucial role in shaping food preferences and eating behavior. Culture values and norms kind of dictate what's considered desirable or undesirable in terms of food choices that influences our eating habits. When we talk about other factors that control eating, have you ever eaten so much of something that you really like it and it makes you feel sick? I'm surprised that I still like H-E-B's Rocky Road ice cream because it's not unusual for me to come close to finishing a half gallon before I go to bed. This sensation of diminished appeal for a specific food after overconsumption is attributed to the effect of leptin. And remember, that reduces the tongue's sensitivity to sweet taste once it's satiated. This phenomenon can lead to what's called taste aversion, where a particular food, it starts to become disliked due to an association with sickness or nausea. I've never felt that with the Rocky Road ice cream, but I have celiac disease, which is, I get sick if I eat wheat gluten. And I was in Italy and the pizza looked amazing. And it's one of the few times I cheated on the diet and said, I'm going to have that pizza. Well, I got so sick, I really didn't crave pizza. I haven't craved it for years. And that's kind of what that taste aversion is. The establishment of taste aversion, it's kind of a form of classical conditioning. If you remember Pavlov's dog, it's facilitated by a biological preparedness to link gastrointestinal stress or distress with previously consumed foods. It's an adaptive learning mechanism. It serves to protect us actually from ingesting harmful foods or things that could cause us to be sick. The taste modification plays a role in maintaining dietary variety, and it prevents nutritional imbalances. For instance, exclusive consumption of a particular food, such as a fad diet, may eventually lead to discomfort, subsequently creating an aversion to restore dietary equilibrium. So, however, in a society abundant with a diverse range of palatable foods, these taste shifts can potentially contribute to overeating and consequently obesity. The easy accessibility and variety of appetizing foods can prompt individuals to switch from one indulgence to another potentially undermining dietary balance and overall health. Having Asperger's, it has its advantages and disadvantages. My friends know now not to ask me questions unless they can handle the answer. For example, when I was in college, my friend asked me if a shirt made him look fat. I looked at him and said, no, I think it's your refrigerator. But let's talk about dieting. A diet isn't just about shedding pounds. It's about the types and quantities of food that you regularly consume. Some diets can actually nudge us toward overeating, especially those that are heavy on sugar and fat. And let's face it, our North American culture isn't exactly serving up the healthiest options. Think supersized meals and calorie-packed fast food. With the obesity epidemic in full swing, we're bombarded with a buffet of new diets every year, promising quick fixes like surviving on grapefruit and protein. Sure, you may, shed a few pounds, but chances are you're going to gain it back once your diet ends. It's like our bodies are playing kind of a game, slowing down metabolism, becoming a pro at storing extra calories as fat just in case there's a famine in the future or something. But this whole, what they call yo-yo dieting business, that's where we keep bouncing between losing and gaining weight. It's a risky, risky game to play. It not only messes with our metabolic rate, it also hikes up our body's set point for fat. It makes it easier to pile it back on afterward, not to mention the increased risk of heart disease, premature death. So what's the solution? It's all about making lasting changes in our eating and exercise habits. Think of it as behavioral dieting. This approach puts the focus on mindful eating, portion control, and developing a balanced, sustainable diet that doesn't make you feel like you're on a starvation mission. It's like finding that sweet spot where you can enjoy your meals, stay healthy, and say goodbye to going on diets. It's just about the lifestyle choices that we make. That's what's going to change it. It's lifestyle choices with that balanced meal and diet combined with moderate exercise. So let's look at eating disorders. You've heard about anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. They're not just a matter of unhealthy eating habits at this point. They represent serious and potential life-threatening conditions that really demand our attention. We need to talk about. You may have a friend that has this problem and you need to know about this a little bit more. Anorexia nervosa, it's characterized by like self-starvation and life-threatening weight loss. It has the highest mortality rate per year, according to the American Journal of Psychiatry. But then, meanwhile, we have bulimia nervosa. That's marked by binge eating a whole bunch and then purging afterward. It carries its own set of physical and psychological risks, and it also, it affects 1 to 2% of the population. That's reported by the National Eating Disorders Association. But these disorders not only impact physical health, but they have a huge effect on the mental well-being of people, making it imperative to understand and address them with seriousness that they deserve. So let's look at each one of those a little bit more closely. So we've got the first one, anorexia nervosa. It's a severe eating disorder characterized by self-starvation, leading to life-threatening weight loss. Despite being physically hungry, individuals with anorexia often compulsively avoid food, driven by a relentless desire to lose weight. What starts as seemingly normal dieting can gradually spiral into a dominating force, wreaking havoc on both physical and mental well-being. People with anorexia face debilitating health complications, with the condition carrying the highest mortality rates among mental illness. Symptoms of anorexia nervosa include a refusal to maintain a healthy body weight, an intense fear of gaining weight despite being underweight, a distorted body image, and purging behaviors such as vomiting or misusing laxatives. It's a complex and dangerous condition that demands urgent attention and understanding. And then let's look at bulimia nervosa. This is another serious eating disorder. It involves reoccurring episodes of binge eating followed by purging behaviors such as vomiting or misuse of laxatives. Excessive exercise and fasting are also common strategies to prevent weight gain. Individuals with bulimia, like those with anorexia, are unduly influenced by their body weight, often leading to a damaging cycle of disordered eating and behavior. These eating disorders, both of them, pose significant risks to both physical and mental health, and it's crucial to recognize the signs and symptoms to provide appropriate support and intervention. So, what are the causes of these eating disorders? People who suffer from these eating disorders are extremely dissatisfied with their bodies, and usually they have distorted views of themselves. In the textbook, the authors kind of described the following. They gave the following reasons for these eating disorders. They actually classify and they put women, they say, have low self-esteem and exaggerated fears of becoming fat. Many overestimate their body size by 25% or more. As a result, they think they're disgustingly fat when in reality, they're wasting away. Men, they say, on the other hand, generally think they're not muscular enough if they're not cut or don't have a six-pack. I mean, really, a six-pack? I mean, they're saying that only women have self-esteem issues. No, I don't think that's actually right, but that's what it kind of says in the text. And I think mainly because of all the media, social media, trying to have these higher expectations for women is what they're trying to discuss. So let's look at like the treatment of people with eating disorders. Most people suffer from, this type of disorders. They aren't going to seek help on their own. This is especially true for men because eating disorders are often perceived to be a female problem. Typically, it takes strong urging by family or friends to get victims into treatment. And treatment for anorexia usually begins with giving drugs to relieve obsessive compulsive fears of gaining weight. Then a medical diet is used to restore weight and health. Next, a counselor may help patients work on the emotional conflicts that led to weight loss. For bulimia, behavioral counseling may include self-monitoring and food intake. A related cognitive behavioral approach focuses on changing the thinking patterns and beliefs about weight and body shape that perpetuate eating. We know that social media in the U.S. impacts body image, but how does this compare to different cultures or nations? Women with eating disorders are not alone in having body image problems. In Western cultures like ours, many women learn to see themselves as objects and are evaluated by others. As a result, they try to shape their bodies to the cultural idea of slimness through dieting. About 400 years ago, between 1500 and 1900, bodily weight and volume for both men and women had a strong visual appeal to be heavier. And then what happens with all the advertisements and things like that, just looking at the fashion magazine, tends to leave women less satisfied with their weight. They're anxious to be thinner. But of course, back then in the 1500s to 1900, someone that would be considered too thin, what we consider perfect today, maybe in our world, would be way too thin and undesirable. But some women from cultural backgrounds appear to be less acceptable to the glorification of slimness. For example, Asian American college students are only half as likely to diet as other college women are. That's what the research shows. Within the African American and Pacific Islander communities, there's a general preference for a fuller and shapelier figure. In these groups, the larger body size is still associated with high school status, health, and beauty. Clearly, what constitutes an attractive body style is a matter of opinion, but it's influenced by cultural values. So let's look at some research about women, specifically in body image. Women with abnormal eating habits were asked to rate their body shape on a scale similar to the one you see on the slide. As the group chose ideal figures, which were much thinner than what they thought their current weights were. Most women say they want to be thinner than they currently are, but to a lesser degree than women with eating problems. Women with eating problems, it's usually a lot different. Notice that women with eating problems chose an ideal weight that was even thinner than what they thought men prefer. This isn't typical of most women. These are women with eating problems. In this classic study, only women with eating problems wanted to be thinner than what they thought men find attractive, but overall, 65% of men and 57% of women preferred an overweight body size in the opposite gender. Let me say that again. Overall, this is what research shows. 65% of men and 57% of women prefer what's considered to be an overweight body size in opposite gender. We're not talking about obesity. With obesity, it was only 4% of men and 1% of women actually indicated a preference to have someone that was obese inside as an opposite gender. But you get the picture. Earlier, I mentioned we would get back to the understanding the best way to maintain a healthy body image. The first consideration must be a healthy and balanced diet. A balanced diet that includes a variety of nutrient-rich foods coupled with proportion control is essential for sustaining weight loss. It's important to avoid restrictive diets and focus on creating a healthy relationship with your food. When it comes to exercise, a combination of different activities is beneficial for overall fitness. You need to strive for consistency and find activities that you enjoy to remain long-term, to have long-term adherence to your fitness routine. Remember, the key to successful and sustainable weight loss is adopting healthy lifestyle habits that you can maintain or want to maintain for a long period of time. So next, in addition to the balanced diet, we mentioned to maintain a healthy weight, we need to exercise. That is engaging in a mix of cardiovascular activities, strength training, and flexibility exercises to promote overall fitness and well-being. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity per week. However, the key is here, if that doesn't sound fun to you, the aerobics or this high intensity, it's more important to start with something that you enjoy doing. That's the important thing. If you don't enjoy it, if it becomes hard or something you don't want to do, there's very little chance that you're going to continue to do this. So incorporate the physical activity into daily routines. Maybe walking for the first 30 to 45 minutes during the day. If it makes you happy, go for a walk, get your mind right before you start your day. That can have a tremendous positive impact on your well-being. So for a quick example of an unhealthy diet, let's watch a quick video about one of our favorite foods we like to eat, at least I do and my kids like, and that's McDonald's French fries.
How unhealthy can McDonald's fries be? They're just potatoes, right? Well, no. Surprisingly to some and unsurprisingly to many, the fries that come with most of your McDonald's meals might turn out to be the most shockingly unhealthy items you'll order from the fast food chain. Here's why. We all love French fries, but if you take a good look at the nutritional stats of McDonald's fries, you might just be horrified. A medium portion of fries includes 340 calories, 16 grams of fat, and 44 grams of carbs. At first glance, that doesn't seem too bad, until you realize it's only a side dish and is more likely to be added to something else the restaurant produces. As a comparison, a breakfast of scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee will set you back just about the same amount. If you're cooking fries at home, you can probably expect a very small handful of things to go into them: potatoes, oil, and salt. So it should come as quite a shock to find that McDonald's fries have 19 ingredients in total. Yes, you'll find the potatoes, oil, and salt that will go into any fries, but you're also going to come across a lot of chemicals, fats, and acids. Some of these ingredients are included for flavor, while some aid the cooking process. Others help preserve the finished product. But the simple fact of the matter is that many are unnecessary, and most are incredibly unhealthy. One of the many ingredients that are thrust into each batch of McDonald's fries is natural beef flavor. This was introduced once the restaurant put an end to cooking their fries in actual beef fat. Beef flavoring itself, the exact ingredients of which aren't required to be disclosed by the companies who make it, doesn't technically qualify as an ingredient according to the FDA. However, you can be sure that the flavoring contains a whole host of things, none of which are guaranteed to come from beef at all.
Where's the beef?
According to McDonald's themselves, dextrose, a form of sugar, is added to their fries because the way their potatoes are par-cooked removes any natural sugars. So the dextrose solution is sprayed onto the fries before cooking to give them the golden appearance they're known for. Dextrose sugar is actually commonly used in baking and constitutes one of the ingredients of McDonald's fries, which remains uniform around the world, even in the countries that use far fewer of the questionable ingredients that are utilized in the USA. TBHQ is a chemical preservative which is used to extend the storage life of many foods. Unsurprisingly, considering you'll find it in most processed foods, it's one of the many ingredients included in McDonald's fries. While it may not be outwardly toxic for humans to consume, the health effects of TBHQ may be significant. It may lead to vision disturbances and other largely undesirable side effects. Fortunately for fry lovers, most of the side effects tend to come with doses much higher than you'll find in your favorite starchy side. The FDA strongly regulates the amounts of TBHQ that can be added to foods, meaning those tasty fries are well within safe limits. Citric acid is probably one of the more unassuming ingredients in McDonald's fries, considering you've likely come across it in more than a few types of fruit. Well, it's not quite citric acid itself that's added to the fries, rather it's a citric-based antioxidant that's used to boost the shelf life of various fried foods. Then you've got your hydrolyzed wheat and milk, the former of which is used in hair products and the latter of which is used in baby formula. These are used in tandem with the beef flavoring to give fries their taste and, unsurprisingly, make McDonald's fries unsuitable for anyone intolerant to wheat or dairy. The cooking process for McDonald's fries goes something like this. First, the non-GMO potatoes are peeled and cut into their distinctive stick-like shape. The natural sugars are removed in a process known as blanching before being doused in chemicals to get their color. Then they're partially fried in oil and the beef flavor and hydrolyzed wheat and milk is added. After this, the fries are frozen and shipped to the restaurants, where they're fried in more oils, and this is where the TBHQ is added too. After they're cooked, salt is added, and the fries are served up to the customer. One of the least healthy aspects of these fries lies in the hydrogenated soybean oil in which they're fried. This oil facilitates the inclusion of trans fats into the cooking process. Trans fats, of course, are exactly as bad as their reputation suggests, and a diet high in trans fats can lead to cholesterol problems, heart disease, and strokes.
And that is why when you first eat a fast food meal, you feel great, and 30 minutes later, you feel terrible.
So, does it make you hungry? Made me a little hungry, but not so much for McDonald's fries. But as far as a self-assessment, how might changes in sleep patterns and circadian rhythms contribute to being overweight? As a student, what can you do to promote healthy ideals of weight, both for men and women? How can these be extended to social circles, friends, study groups, and gatherings where food is often a focus? And now we'll go on to Unit 3, Stimulus and Learn Motives. Before we go on, I'll tell my joke for this section. You know, changing careers is very, very hard. Before I became an IO psychologist, I was actually in sales for 25 years. You know, I was walking down the street the other day and I found a man that had been brutally beaten and robbed. He lay there basically unconscious almost and bleeding. And I can't believe I ran up to him and I said, "Oh my gosh, whoever did this must really need some help. Do you know how I can get in contact with him?" Okay, that was probably funnier than my head than when I just said it, but you get the picture. All right, let's talk about stimulus motives. It's not just about seeking entertainment. It's about our inherent drive for information, exploration, and sensory input, which actually helps us survive. From infancy, we're wired to interact with our environment, touching, tasting, exploring the world around us. And it's not just as humans. Animals show this too. Take monkeys, for example. They eagerly tackle a complex puzzle just for the thrill of exploration, without needing any external rewards. This natural inclination for stimulation is a fundamental part of both human and some animal behavior. Arousal theory, when we get into that, it suggests that we strive to maintain an optimal level of activation stemming from external stimuli, something you may want to write down for the test. This arousal, which pertains to the body and nervous system's activation, varies from 0 during sleep to high levels during moments of excitement or panic. The theory, arousal theory, it says that individuals seek to adjust their arousal levels to achieve homeostasis, as I mentioned before, as both low and high arousal can lead to discomfort, prompting individuals to seek activities that prevent boredom and overstimulation. Furthermore, arousal theory indicates that people differ in their needs for stimulation, with some individuals being high in sensation seeking, preferring intense levels of stimulation. Those high in sensation seeking tend to be bold, independent, and value change, while low sensation seekers are more orderly, nurturant, and enjoy the company of others. However, it's important to note that high sensation seekers may be more prone to engaging in high-risk behaviors such as smoking, drinking, and substance abuse. So people who are bold, independent, and who value change are more likely to be high in sensation seeking. Optimal arousal for something called peak performance. The Yerkes-Dodson law, it illustrates the relationship between arousal and performance, indicating that individuals generally perform their best when their arousal level is moderate. Remember that. So to perform at your best, it's not going to be too high. That creates anxiety. The arousal level, if it's too low, creates boredom. So for the perfect performance, for peak performance, it needs to be moderate. A little bit more closer to the high, but moderate. When arousal's too low, of course, I said performance suffers due to a lack of energy and focus, while excessively high arousal can lead to anxiety and decreased performance. This relationship is kind of depicted by an inverted, you see on the screen, an inverted U-shaped curve, where with moderate to levels of arousal being most conducive to optimal performance for tasks of moderate complexity. For simple and kind of well-practiced tasks, things that you do often, higher arousal levels do not compromise performance, allowing individuals to focus their attention effectively. So in other words, if you have that very high arousal, as long as it's something you do all the time, that's not going to make it to where it's creating that anxiety because it's something you're used to. However, as tasks become more complex, that's the inverted U-shape you see relationship between arousal and performance, it becomes very evident with the optimal level of arousal for peak performance decreasing as task difficulty increases. So if it's difficulty for you, you just realize that that means that that's going to create anxiety for you specifically. And that means for tasks that are greater complexity, peak performance is achieved at lower levels of arousal. So you need to kind of know how that works. For instance, the anxiety you may experience before you take an exam. So you're going to take your quiz. That's kind of how the Yerkes-Dodson law operates. An optimal level of stress can help you focus on the test and remember the information you studied, but too much test anxiety can impair your ability to concentrate and make it more difficult to remember the correct answers. You know, with this stated, do you know how to reduce test anxiety? If not, let's watch this quick video.
Hi, I'm Chris Thomas, the Assistant Director of the Center for Counseling and Student Development here at Coppin State University. I have for you today the CCSD's top 10 tips to reduce test anxiety.
So the best way to prepare for test anxiety, not preparing for test anxiety, hello. I want to prepare to be anxious. That's tip number one. So the best way to avoid test anxiety is to prepare. Because if you don't know, you just don't know. Because some people, I think, they say they have test anxiety and they just didn't prepare, that's all. If you don't study, you should be nervous. You just don't know it. You should be, that's normal to be nervous. Tip number two, make sure you take a lot of material that you're studying and space it out into nice little nuggets. Trying to cram everything at the same time the night before usually doesn't work out too well. Tip number three, make sure you get a good night's rest so you can be awake and ready to go. Tip number four, make sure you show up to class early so you can get comfortable, attend to those last minute details, and be ready for the exam ahead. Tip number five, relax. Take a few deep breaths and get back to work. Tip number six, write down all those formulas, facts, keywords, mnemonic devices that are kind of running around in your mind. Write them all down in the margins or in the back of your test paper so they'll be ready when you need them. Tip number seven, complete those easy questions first. That'll give you the momentum and confidence to move through the harder questions. Tip number eight, take your own test. Forget about other people, what they're doing or not doing. Focus on your test. Take your test. Tip number nine, focus on the actual question in front of you without getting too distracted as your mind may wander off into other directions. Tip number 10, studying is half the battle. If you're still experiencing test anxiety after following the strategies that we talked about, you might want to set an appointment with the school counselor.
So here's a list of additional ideas to help you reduce test anxiety. You know, if you'd like to pause the video to write down a few notes, you can. I'm not going to go over them. I think that the professor before had a great list that can help you reduce that test anxiety. There are two types of achievement motivators that are also called learned motivators because they're not innate motivators. They're something we're born with. That are called need for achievement and need for power. Learned motives derive from acquired needs associated with valued human concepts rather than being closely tied to survival like biological and stimulus motives. These learned motives are social goals such as success, achievement, competition, money, possession, status, love, approval, grades, dominance, power, group belonging, or they're all acquired through socialization and cultural conditioning. Let's look at each one of them a little bit more closely. The first, of course, need for achievement. It's often seen as small n, capital ACH, drives individuals to excel in their endeavors, leading them to approach tasks with perseverance, passion, and self-confidence. Those high in needs for achievement tend to complete difficult tasks, achieve better grades, and excel in their occupations. They attribute success to their own ability and are likely to renew their efforts when faced with failure. This drive for achievement extends beyond material wealth, as individuals may seek challenges and test their ability for intrinsic rather than extrinsic rewards. A characteristic of people in need for achievement strives to do well anytime they're being evaluated. Now let's look for need for power. In contrast, the need for power reflects a desire to have influence or control over others, often manifesting in visible displays of importance such as expensive possessions and prestigious clothing. The pursuit of power and financial success, while part of the American dream, can lead to poor adjustment and unhappiness. This highlights the distinction between the need for achievement, driven by intrinsic motives, and the need for power, which can have a negative implication for well-being. Also, there's two other types of kind of motives that fall into this. Social motives, just know that they're learned motives acquired as part of growing up in a particular society and culture. And then stimulus motives actually refers to, it reflects for the need of information, exploration, manipulation, and sensory input beyond simple entertainment. According to Yerkes-Dodson law, when should arousal be at its highest? Do you remember that? When the task is simple. Now that we've looked at motivation, let's turn our attention to emotion. For many years, philosophers and psychologists focused more of their attention on cognition, assuming that rational thinking was a window into the best of human functioning. Emotion was seen as interfering with cognition and was therefore something that needed to be controlled. More recently, though, psychologists have embraced the value of our emotional lives and noted that there's a tight coupling between cognition and emotion. Indeed, it's generally accepted that cognition and emotion are often so tightly intertwined that it's impossible to distinguish where one begins and the other ends. An emotion is a state that's characterized by four basic components: experience, physiology, expression, and cognitions. In this section, we're going to take a look at each one a little bit closer. But before we go, it's time for my joke. I know you're ready for it. What do you call a sad cup of coffee? Depresso. Sorry. Okay, emotional experience and moods. Private emotional experiences are the most recognizable aspects of emotions, like feelings such as anger, sadness, and happiness. While there's a common understanding of what these emotions feel like, research suggests that emotions may not have distinct, universally experienced signature feelings. They may be different for everyone. The reality appears to be very complex. So emotions, you need to know, versus moods. We're going to look at the two, emotions versus moods. Emotions are typically very brief, lasting only seconds or minutes, and are often triggered by specific events or situations. In contrast, moods can persist for hours, days, or even months, and they're generally considered general in nature, not necessarily linked to a specific event. So moods are influenced by your circadian rhythms, like body temperature fluctuations. That affects emotional states. For instance, when a body temperature is at its peak, there's a positive mood is more likely. You know, when you're really cold or really hot, you're going to be a little bit more moody, right? Regardless of sleep patterns or missed rest. And this highlights the close connection between moods and our internal rhythms. When we experience strong emotions like fear and anger, our bodies undergo a series of physiological changes, regardless of the specific situation. Whether it's an African bushman facing a lion in the Kalahari Desert or a city dweller feeling scared in a dark alley, the emotion of fear triggers similar physical reactions, such as muscle tension, a racing heartbeat, dryness in our mouth, sweating and trembling, among others. Our autonomic nervous system, ANS, is a part of the peripheral nervous system, and it plays a key role in regulating the physiological responses. It consists of two branches. There's the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch. The sympathetic branch, it's triggered. That's the fight or flight response. It's an emergency reaction or action. And it promotes reactions like the increased heart rate, release of sugar into the bloodstream. Think about that. The sugar that's released, when your body releases it through that insulin, that creates energy and makes someone stronger. And it also, not only that sugar in our bloodstream, this response, sympathetic response, also it slows our digestion. We're not thinking about digestion. Everything else is at this heightened rate. In contrast, we have a parasympathetic branch, and it actually is the reversal, which calms our body and restoring our balance after periods of real high emotion. And it's kind of a balancing act. You know, the relative balance of activity in those two branches, it determines whether we feel relaxed or aroused at any given moment. While the sympathetic system responds rapidly to emotional arousal, the parasympathetic system reacts more slowly. This explains why physiological signs of arousal like a racing heart take time to settle down after experiencing intense emotions. Additionally, after a strong emotional shock, the parasympathetic system may overreact, leading to lowered blood pressure and potentially causing dizziness or fatigue or fainting. Understanding these physiological responses provides insight into how our bodies react to emotional stimuli, highlighting the intricate interplay between our emotions and the autonomic nervous system. So, also, we talk about experiential processing in psychology. What is that? It refers basically to a therapeutic approach that centers on the client's present experiences and guides their cognitive and emotional processing towards client-defined goals during psychotherapy. Emotion physiology and the brain is different. That's where you think of psychologist Joseph Ledoux. His research suggests that our basic fear response, it's automatic, and it's not under the higher control of our brain. And I start thinking like when I started screaming and in slow motion fell down off my bike after I ran over a water moccasin at Lake Livingston State Park a few weeks ago. That was not in my own control. That was just that quick reaction. The automatic fear response, it's attributed to the amygdala, a part of the limbic system in our brain, which rapidly processes sensory information before the cortex. This subcortical circuit enables quick responses to potential danger before conscious awareness. While the limbic system manages initial emotions like fear, further processing occurs in the cortex, leading to complex and rich emotional experiences reflecting the intricacies of our lives. So, how is this emotion physiology used in everyday life? You know, for one, investigators use it in lie detection. So you've heard of polygraph testing, polygraphs. They commonly use lie detectors that measure bodily changes associated with emotions to detect falsehoods. Through their accuracy is questionable, and there are concerns regarding privacy and invasion of our privacy that persists. This was invented in 1915 by William Marston. You don't need to know that, but it is recording changes in our heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, and galvanic skin response, GSR, which measures sweating, but it cannot differentiate between lying and other emotional states like fear or anxiety. It's just going to measure that emotional response. And there are some challenges and limitations that you could read about in the book, and there are a lot of flaws. It talks about, despite claims, of 95% accuracy, there are errors even when the test is conducted properly, in factors like past emotional experiences, self-inflicted pain, drugs. Some individuals can lie without anxiety, and that can impact the results. So studies have shown that the test is more likely to label innocent individuals as guilty rather than guilty as innocent, leading to concerns about the reliability and fairness. Of course, there's alternative measures, such as brain scans and the functional MRI called fMRI are being explored as potential alternatives to measure brain activity directly. But that's still all in the research phase and is not being used, I don't believe, today. When we experience emotions, there are always ways which we can display those feelings. In some cases, emotions can be expressed in maladaptive ways. For example, stage fright or performance anxiety. It can spoil performances. Similarly, expressions of hate, anger, contempt, disgust, and fear can disrupt relationships. More often, though, emotions aid survival by promoting adaptive behaviors such as attacking, fleeing, seeking comfort, helping others, and reproducing. Such behaviors help us adjust to changing conditions. Moreover, as social animals, it would be impossible for humans to live in groups, cooperate with raising children, and defend one another without this emotion-related expression and behavior. So, facial expressions and body language. Emotional expressivity isn't just about facial expressions. It includes body language like touch, posture, gaze, all of which play a significant role in conveying emotions. Even our voice, particularly the tone and rhythm, provide cues about our emotional state. And then we have kinesics. Kinesics is a study of nonverbal movements, and it argues that the dynamics of a movement can be sufficient to infer an underlying emotional state. So people may say one thing, but these kinesics is a study of the nonverbal that says, I don't know if they're telling the truth. They could be lying or whatever. So, and then we have the definition of emotional contagion. That refers to our emotions becoming more similar to those of people we interact with, whether in person or online. Behavioral mimicry. It's where we even most of the times unconsciously imitate others. That influences our interactions and how we perceive others. There's even online emotional contagion, which is using online platforms, especially social media, that have a big impact on our emotional contagion. It's emotionally charged content is more likely to be shared if it could affect the emotions of those who read it. This has raised ethical questions about managing emotional content and sparked debates about the greater need for regulation and the importance of digital literacy and emotional regulation and online engagement. But, for the test, regarding like gender differences too, when we talk about emotions and expression, boys actually are more emotionally expressive as infants, but at early childhood, girls are more emotionally expressive. When most people think about it, they always think that girls are always more emotionally expressive. And it's not the case. Actually, boys are when they're very, very young, but then what are they told? Don't cry, don't show emotion. Those are the kind of things that boys often are taught, so they learn to kind of repress that emotion and that reaction. In the photo, when shown to groups of simplified faces without labels, that angry and scheming faces, they kind of jumped out at people before the sad, happy, and neutral faces. An ability to rapidly detect threatening expressions probably helped our ancestors survive. And also, these things are very similar. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in or what culture, the faces are the same. So they're unilateral. Regulating emotional expression. In our lives, we often regulate our emotional expressions to align with the situation, sometimes showing less emotion when we feel than we feel, and at other times displaying more emotion than we actually experience. This active management of emotion-related expression is known as emotion regulation. There are some effects, too, of suppressing these emotions. Suppressing outward signs of emotion, especially negative ones, can be taxing, increasing activity in the sympathetic nervous system and impairing thinking and memory, leading to a high cost for maintaining a calm exterior. There's effective emotional regulation strategies too. Situational selection is choosing to be in situations around people that kind of evoke positive emotions and minimizing exposure to kind of stress-inducing or unpleasant environments. Then we have situational modification. That's making efforts to alter unavoidable situations to make them more manageable and less emotionally taxing. Like if you're forced to go somewhere you don't want to be, then in your mind you can practice a situation modification to try to see something fun about that event. And then there's redirecting attention. That's our shifting focus to avoid negative emotions and increase the likelihood of experiencing positive ones, thus managing our emotional response. Cognitive reappraisal is changing the interpretation of events to influence emotional responses. such as reframing a challenging situation in a more positive light. Response modulation is controlling outward signs of emotion by managing a neutral or positive expression and managing body language to align with the social context. These strategies offer alternatives to suppressing emotions, providing effective ways to manage and regulate our emotional expressions in various situations. For the test, also know that it's better to manage emotions, manage them, than to completely suppress them, because suppressing emotions can remember, it impairs our thinking and memory as we're kind of devoting a lot of energy to that self-control. So it's better to manage it than suppress it. There are two major cognitive influences on experience of emotion. They're called attribution and appraisal. Need to remember that for the test too. So we're going to talk about each one of those to see how our thoughts and emotions are closely connected. Emotional appraisal is our evaluations of situations greatly impact the emotions we feel. For example, two people can have very different emotional responses to the same roller coaster ride. I love to ride roller coasters and feel excited, while my son, who is traumatized at a young age, let's just say he's not as excited. Both feelings are valid, and they're based on our appraisals that are different of that experience. Attributions are explanations for why things happen also influence our emotions. Different explanations for the same situation can lead to varying emotional responses. For instance, attributing a behavior to a lack of control may evoke anger, while attributing it to illness and fatigue may elicit a different emotional response. These cognitive processes play a key role in shaping our emotional experiences, showing how our thoughts and emotions are intricately linked. So just food for thought. Different cultures have different norms when it comes to emotional expressiveness. What are typical expression norms for your culture? Are the norms are they different for males and females? Why or why not? And what are the potential barriers to the lack of emotional expressiveness? Unit number 5. Over the years, psychologists have put forward many theories to explain how the 4 components of emotions are related to one another. We'll begin by exploring 2 of these theories of emotion. One is the James Lange and the other is the Cannon-Bard theories. What's noteworthy about each of these ideas about emotion is they focused on just 3 of the 4 aspects of emotion: experience or feelings, physiology, and behavior. It wasn't until later that cognitions were incorporated into researchers' thinking, as we'll see when we look at a more recent theory advanced by Shafter and Singer. Finally, we'll conclude this section by examining current ideas about how we can account for the complexity of human emotional experience, including basic theories of emotion. For your test, in short, cognitive theory of emotion states emotions occur when physical arousal is labeled or interpreted on the basis of experience and situational cues. And of course, want another joke? Whether you want it or not, you're going to get one. Do you know why the psychology professor broke up with the biology professor? They just had no chemistry. Let's compare the 3 theories I just referred to. The first is James Lange theory. It's proposed by William James and Carl Lange. This theory suggests that physiological arousal precedes the experience. That's an important part. It precedes the experience of emotional. So that arousal occurs first. For example, when faced with a threatening situation, such as encountering, say, a bear walked in your room right now, our body's physiological response, like increased heart rate, precede the feeling of fear. That happens immediately. And on the test, it's important to note that physiological arousal refers to how your body reacts to fear. And you know that that's pounding heart, sweating palms, hyperventilation. And then we look at the Cannon-Bard theory. Walter Cannon and Philip Bard proposed an alternative theory suggesting that emotional experience, expression, and physiological arousal occurred simultaneously at the same time. For instance, seeing that threatening bear activates brain structures that lead to body arousal, running, and the feeling of fear. And they say it occurs concurrently. So those are 2 different theories there. And you need to know on a test that many of our physiological changes associated with emotions they're caused by the release of adrenaline and noradrenaline. And really, adrenaline and noradrenaline are the same thing. When it's stored in our brain, and this chemical is stored in our brain, it's called noradrenaline. But when it's released because of this fight or flight response, when you have that sympathetic response, that system, it reacts, that noradrenaline is released and called or referred to as adrenaline, that gives you that energy, that level of energy to help you avoid that situation. And then we have the Schlatter and Singer's two-factor theory. They introduced a two-factor theory emphasizing the role of cognitive processes in emotion, the thinking behind the emotion. They suggested that emotions arise from general physiological arousal and the cognitive labeling of its cause. For example, when experiencing physiological arousal, the individual attributes it to external stimuli, leading to the experience of emotion such as fear, surprise, or delight. So if we think about back with a baby, if you remember, that did not find this white furry animal scary until the researchers made the loud noise, then the association, that associative learning, related the two, which caused that. So that was cognitive, saying that is something to be fearful of. And that's what, the Schlatter and Singer were both saying. These theories, all three of them provide different perspectives on the relationship between our physiological arousal and our emotions, but it just kind of highlights the complexity of emotional experiences and the influence of our cognitive process on our feelings. So basic emotion theories. Contemporary theories of emotion, known as basic emotion theories, BETs, view emotions as brief states arising from cognitive appraisals involving distinct expressions, physiology, and behavior. So one influential behavioral or basic emotion theory was proposed by Paul Ekman. It identifies 6 basic emotions. That's surprise, happiness, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear, suggesting that these emotions are relatively unlearned and universally expressed across cultures. So what does that mean? Kind of, if it's unlearned, it means it's innate. It's something we're born with. However, recent research challenges the simplicity of Ekman's theory, indicating that human emotions are more complex than the original 6. It's actually suggested there may be 25 emotional states emerging from individual appraisals, how we are cognitively processing information based on our experiences, and each contain different subtypes. It's very complex. Furthermore, while there are similarities in emotions across cultures, significant differences have also been identified, influenced by our social norms and cultural language. As our understanding of emotions continues to evolve, it becomes clear that the human emotional experience is diverse and multifaceted. So for your test, just know basic emotion theories suggest that emotions are brief in duration. That's the most important thing to know. Not everything, but that's the most important. So which theory of emotion states that emotional arousal, behavior, and experiences are nearly simultaneous? Remember which one? Cannon-Bard. All right, now let's talk about Unit 6, psychology, and your skill set is positivity and optimism. This joke, I'm just going to give you kind of a cartoon. You're not a bad dog. You're just a dog who does bad things. I used to love Far Side cartoons. I don't know if that's Far Side, but similar to it. So positive psychology, what is that all about? And it really focuses on optimism and well-being. In addition to studying human problems, a lot of psychologists, especially over the last 30 years, have increasingly focused on positive psychology, which explores human strengths, virtues, and positive emotions. Positive psychology really goes through various topics, including empathy and helping behavior, creativity, defining coping strategies and helping to create these effective coping strategies. And emotional intelligence was introduced with the positive psychology. Optimism and positive emotions play a crucial role in subjective well-being, which reflects overall life satisfaction, frequent positive emotions, and relatively few negative emotions. Optimism influences how individuals interpret life events, affecting our emotional responses and their ability to navigate life's challenges. Optimistic individuals tend to have a more positive outlook. They find humor in setbacks and approach adversity as a challenge rather than a defeat. So again, for the test, optimistic people tend to find humor in disappointment. While disproportional optimism may be a personality trait for some, optimism is also a skill that can be cultivated and improved upon through practice. When balanced with realistic thinking, optimism can lead to a better health, enhanced coping strategies, and more satisfying relationships. However, unrealistic optimism can lead to neglecting problems, hindering effective problem solving, and worsening difficulties. Therefore, maintaining a balance between hopeful and realistic thinking is essential in achieving well-being and effectively addressing life's challenges. So, as you may have guessed, optimists tend to have a more positive, explanatory style, one that minimizes stressful situations as unstable, local, and external, and take credit for positive experiences as being more stable, global, and internal. Explanatory style is a way a person creates a narrative about a specific event in their life. So, how can we have a more optimistic point of view, or is there a strategy for changing that? Because our attitude, it separates optimists from pessimists. It's possible to cultivate optimism through various methods of tested in psychological research. One effective approach involves spending 5 minutes daily imagining your best possible self, leading to increased feelings and optimism. Understanding your explanatory style is also crucial when interpreting negative events. Consider 3 key elements or components of your explanation. So the first is persuasiveness. Assess the extent to which you believe the event will impact others in your life. Optimists view negative events as limited in their effects. Permanence. Consider how long you expect the conditions to last. Optimists see negative events as short-term. Personal. Evaluate whether you attribute this event to something unchangeable about your personality or changeable circumstances. Optimists tend to consider changeable circumstances as the cause of negative events, while pessimists attribute them to stable aspects of their personality. In summary, optimists interpret negative events as limited short-term and the result of changeable circumstances, while pessimists interpret positive events as broader long-term and the result of stable aspects of their personality. By understanding these concepts, you can work towards adopting a more optimistic attitude.
I deserve good things. I am entitled to my share of happiness. I refuse to beat myself up. I am an attractive person. I am fun to be with.
Daily Affirmation with Stuart Smalley. Stuart Smalley is a caring nurturer, a member of several 12-step programs, but not a licensed therapist.
I'm going to do a terrific show today, and I'm going to help people because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Personal reflection, if we had time and we don't, I would have you read each one of these questions and just see and write down if you kind of look at this more positive or more negative, the effects, and also try to understand your explanatory style if it's more pessimistic, and I would challenge your thinking. But we don't have time for that, but still you can think about it if you have the time to pause the video. So understand self-assessment. What is motivation and what drives motivation in people? Hopefully you know that by now. How do biological motives shape our actions? What's differential between theories of motivation? How does the need for achievement and the opponent process theory shape our motivation? And can you name the 4 basic aspects of emotion and connect them to existing theories of motivation? And this is what we've covered today. Quite a bit of information, I know, but very, very important. And next week, what will be up is Chapter 11, Sex, Gender, and Sexuality. Thank you so much for paying attention today, and have a great week.